Filchanoff, and welcome to Sure Things. For today's show, we are going to be discussing one of the gems of the shoreline. Today, I'm happy to introduce Kitty Stalsburg. She's Executive Director at High Hopes Riding Center, and today we're going to learn all about the programs they offer and some of the background behind it. So welcome, Kitty. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be here with you.
I was very excited to have this opportunity, and I did want to start, and I know I asked you before, by just reading the mission statement.
Please do.
Because I find that so inspiring. And it says, the mission statement for High Hopes, benefiting the bodies, minds, and spirits of people with disabilities. High Hopes fosters a community where horse and human interactions improve lives. And I thought that was wonderful, so kudos to you.
Thank you.
So why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about your background and yourself and how you got involved with High Hopes.
I have been very, very fortunate in my life story to be able to be at High Hopes for about 34 years now. I came into it, a very good friend of mine growing up said, "Hey, Kitty, I have something I think you might be interested in doing." I had been a rider as a kid growing up, and I had a BS in animal science from Cornell, and I was home, and she said, I think I have something you might be interested in, and that was it. I started out as a volunteer. I then moved on to become a part-time instructor, part-time barn manager, part-time program director. I was the full-time program director for about 17 years, and then I've been the executive director for the last 16 years or so. So
and
long time.
You started as a volunteer. That's awesome. Did you live? Have you always lived in the area?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Deep River.
Okay.
And then I moved all the way across the river, and I've lived in Lyme for the last 34 years.
So you're there. Now, when you started, how long has High Hopes actually been in operation?
High Hopes was founded in 1974. Okay. We were started by a visionary named Sis Gould and a number of other folks in the local community, many of whom are still involved in some aspect, at least today, or their families are. So it's really a grassroots community organization. We were nomadic for the first 15 years, and we would move from site to site. Monday we might be at this barn, Westbrook Hunt Club let us be there, or Huntersfield Stable, or you name it, various barns and homes. People would load up their horses, and it wasn't until the late 1980s where or mid 80s where we actually leased a facility, and then the late 1980s and 1990 we moved into our facility on 36 Townwoods Road in Old Lyme.
And how did that come about? Was that a donation, that land?
It was it takes a village story.
Yeah.
It was visionaries again. Jeff and Holly Ridgway have been involved for a very long time. Sis and Lit Gould and their families. Many of the other local folks in the community knew that we had grown to the point where we needed our own facility. We couldn't be nomadic anymore. We really needed to invest in this organization. And so we started a campaign to raise the money to buy land, build a barn. And as it turns out, the people that owned the property, in turn, every payment we would make to them, they would give back to us. And that's how we actually have been very fortunate to have a very modest endowment that we have to this day.
That's really heartwarming to even talk about that. Let's talk about the program itself. Can you tell us a bit more about High Hopes?
Yes, so we are approaching. We're in our 46th year. It's hard to believe we're almost 50 years old. And the therapeutic riding is based on the premise that the movement of the horse moves the rider's body in a way that most normally will mimic normal human walking. So it's for someone who maybe has abnormal development, has a physical disability, hasn't been able to walk, maybe they've suffered a stroke later in life. Now, every time you and I walk, not on a horse, our pelvis moves forward and back, side to side, and rotationally. There's no way that movement can be duplicated in a traditional therapy setting. When you sit on a horse, those three elements happen. So for someone who can't do it themselves, sitting astride, now their body gets the same movement input as if they were actually walking. That in turn translates to improvements in digestive, respiratory, sensory, neurological, all across the board. the bigger, not necessarily the bigger, but another total element of it for those who've ever ridden a horse is the fact that sitting on a horse makes you feel great about yourself and your own abilities. So there's improvements in self-esteem, self-concept, and more recently now with our work that we've been doing with both veterans and individuals who've suffered any type of trauma or post-traumatic stress issues, the horse is an authentic reflector of your feelings and emotions. So if you come to the horse and an interaction with the horse and you're in a heightened arousal, or you're nervous, or you're angry, or the horse will reflect oftentimes in a very genuine manner a reaction to your emotional state. And that, for someone who is having trouble regulating their emotions, but yet really wants to communicate with the horse, that's a great motivator to say, oh wow, that horse doesn't want to have anything to do with me today because I'm mad or I'm angry or I'm sad or so that helps them realize this is what I'm projecting.
Wow, so it almost works both ways, because I'm sure, as you said earlier, getting on the horse, self-esteem, feeling more confident, which also the horse must pick up on, and then the opposite way too. That is very interesting.
And that's where that mission statement comes in. It's that the two interactions and validating and recognizing both the horse perspective and the human perspective. And there's gifts that go both ways.
So is there research that has been done, or do I imagine you get inquiries about people wanting to do more research about the connection?
There definitely there's a plethora of research now. We still are not an industry that is sustainable in a very large scale. For instance, there are some insurance reimbursement opportunities, but for the most part, our services are not supported in an insurance industry and a reimbursed perspective. So still needs to be some work on that, unfortunately, but there is a lot of research that talks both about the improvements in self-esteem and self-concept. One of the largest percentages of folks who participate at High Hopes are folks on the autism spectrum, children through adults even. And the horse and that horse interaction can be such a motivator for first words, for first eye contact, for for individuals who are sensory seeking, which many folks on the spectrum are. The constant movement of the horse can now calm them to the point where they can finally look at someone. They can attend to something different. Instead of having to bounce all around and move, they're getting that repetitive input from the horse, and that can have some sensory calming that can allow them to then process things differently.
That is fascinating.
So there's quite a bit of research on that.
That is fascinating. So you must have amazing stories. I actually, on your website, I watched the Max story, which was really very moving as well. About the horses, how do you get them, and who trains the horses to be so responsive?
It does take a very specific horse. One of the things that the horse is a flight-fright animal. They are not an aggressor. They tend to be a prey animal. So they always need to be alert and responsive to something that could be dangerous to them. The horses that are in our work have to be horses that their first response is to look at you as the human working with them and say, is it okay? So typically they are horses that have experienced life in a variety of ways. Many of them are show horses, some of them horses that have kind of been there, done it, horses that trust humans. There have been horses that I've worked with that have come from less positive backgrounds in abusive situations, but that's a unique situation, I think. In general, it has to be a horse that is sound of body and mind, so that has good quality of movement. That's a really important aspect, because it's that movement imparted when someone sits on them that impacts the rider's body. So if you have a horse who has a chronic lameness or an asymmetry, and you put a rider who has an asymmetrical situation, then it just compounds things.
It does.
More and more often, or I will say frequently, our work in this field is also unmounted. And that way, in that capacity, it can be a horse who maybe has either some age issues or soundness issues, but has that personality that really gels with and wants to be with people. So it's the horse that in the pasture is the one that comes over to you at the fence and says, "Hi, I'm here." You know, not the one that turns its back and says, "Leave me alone. I want to hang out with my buddies today."
It sounds like you must have an evaluation process you go through if somebody says, "Oh, by the way, I have this horse. Are you interested?"
Very, very lengthy evaluation process that we go through. It has to, and sometimes, you know, the very smart horses, they get bored.
Yeah.
The very low-key lazy horses maybe are too hard to kind of keep in this level of fitness and soundness that they need. So it really does take a very specific horse. We're fortunate at High Hopes that we own our own facility, and we have pastures and turnouts and, you know, 127 acres, and so the horses are able to be in communicable groups that are they're friendly and a good environment, a natural environment for them. Where they can get out and roam and be healthy as opposed to in confined spaces. But and that also has an impact on the horses, their general care and well-being.
When we talk about the participants in your programs, how does that come about? Are you affiliated with certain associations, agencies, schools, or do parents just seek you out?
All of the above.
All of the above.
All of the above. You know, we very much want to continue to build collaborations. We have collaborative relationships right now with Safe Futures in New London. Many of our local school districts, unfortunately, many of them can't participate amidst the pandemic. But they do know about us, learn. Many of our educational organizations, some of the other social service agencies, Vista right here in local on the shoreline, Bryan House, as well as you know, just trying to ensure that we are available for like the veterans through any avenue. That's one of the populations that we would like to be more able to service, but so many of our veterans either don't know about us. So that's something that I hope folks will help get the word out, that we offer services for military personnel, and particularly as we're approaching November here, and their families. You know, we also offer a wide variety of services. I mentioned both the mounted, the unmounted. We also have carriage driving as well.
Good.
So
We'll talk more about that. I did see that on the website too, by the way. We'll be right back after this short break.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
This is the moment I knew. His future had no boundaries.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
Hi, welcome back. I'm here today with Kitty Stalsburg, Executive Director of High Hopes. Welcome back. So we were talking a bit about the horses, and well, right before break we were talking about your participants and how they are available to your services. And we talked a bit about the horses evaluation, but I wanted to talk then about your participants. Can anyone come in? You know, can a parent sign up a child or a school? Or is there some process they go through?
There's definitely a process. Visiting our website, both for the horse donation or the participant, there's an application form. We do require a physician's information, physician sign off on the fact that, you know, it is not without risk, this activity. We talked about horses, and it is a special horse, but part of the reason it's successful is that when you're on a horse, a couple things. You need to have enough balance to sit astride with dynamic moving surface, and so you have to have an initial aspect of balance. We try to mitigate any of the risk associated with the activity, but you're still on a horse, you're still above the ground, and that horse doesn't always have predictable movement. Right. There's sometimes fear for some of our participants. They need to address that fear, and that's how you and we all grow. Yeah. When we confront our fears, then we grow in our self-esteem and self-concept. And that element of riding is big, and that's how folks can develop their self-esteem and self-concept. But we also do an assessment. Once all the forms are submitted, we will bring in an individual and meet with them and talk with them. Yeah. We create something called an IRP, an individual riding plan, where we understand what their goals are, their family goals, maybe their physical therapist goals, their educator goals, and try to determine, are we able to safely and effectively serve that person in our field and what we offer for services. And then we'll create a plan that says, okay, it's going to be a group lesson for 45 minutes with some grooming and horse management, and we're going to focus on speech and language skills or left-right differentiation or turn taking, whatever it is that person needs.
So I'm curious about this, because it sounds like what we do in the school setting when we have a student that has special needs and we all come together and we look at the parts to come up with the plan, the IEP plan. So at your center, when you have a new student coming in, new participant coming in, do you have the same type of team building? You sit around and look at the needs and wants to determine what that plan will look like?
We definitely can. Yeah. And oftentimes it's not a physically sitting in together, yeah. But we are getting input from physicians, therapists, parents, the individual themselves, and then on our team, program director or the equine specialist, here's the horse that I think will do the best. Here's the type of activity that might accomplish those goals. So identifying the goals, and then how are we going to do that? And then each week we track progress. So we do have progress notes on every participant's, and our job as therapeutic riding instructors is to come up with reasonable goals and objectives so that we can see progress, so that there is change over time.
How long would if there is a typical program, but with dealing with participants, how long would a particular program last?
So typically someone will come in and they'll do it once a week riding. So, and that will vary depending upon their physical stamina, what their needs are. It might be a 30-minute private session, or it might be up to a 60-minute group. It might be mounted, it might be unmounted, it might be carriage driving. And right now we're offering, I think our semester is about 31 weeks. We have a full academic year-round program. And then in the summer we also offer continued programming for once a week riding, but we also have integrated summer camps as well.
31 weeks. I didn't realize it was that long of a process.
There's there's a semester break in there periodically,
sure.
And there is a very small percentage of folks who can't tolerate the cold. Although with climate change, that seems not to be so much an issue anymore. So we do have an indoor arena and an outdoor arena, and right now in our pandemic, we're trying to be very careful. We have mask wearing wherever there's people have to be in close proximity. We try to be outside as much as we can. We have a very large indoor arena space, which is about 100 by 200. But occasionally there's a horse handler and a side walker walking beside someone who's on a horse, and all that team would have masks on.
So do you stay open all year long? When you mentioned the inside arena, so you stay. You mentioned the horse handler and
a side walker.
A side walker. So could you explain what is that? How does that
So
look?
one of the most important roles, secondary probably to the horse, is our volunteers. We could not do what we do without the amazing volunteers that work in our program. So folks who come in, there's many volunteer roles, from fundraising, and we can talk about that, to deliberately coming in and working on fence posts or feeding the horses and caring for the pastures and that big property. But the majority of the volunteers are what we term our program volunteers. So they are either leading the horse or handling the horse in some capacity, or walking beside the rider as side walkers. The sidewalkers tend to be folks who can help the rider. Maybe it's language skills, work on their goals basically. Language skills, how to hold the reins, how to pay attention, time to point, just a verbal cueing, listen to the instructor. Sometimes there's a physical assist with an arm across their thigh to help secure them to the saddle if they're losing their balance.
Yeah.
More often than not, it's to help them attend and focus on the directions. The horse handlers are either leading the horse, they might be what we call long lining, driving the horse from behind, or sometimes just at the horse's head, helping ensure that the rider is able to steer and control that horse.
And I assume there's training for the
Lots of training.
So a volunteer can come in
of training.
and you train, and so they feel more confident
Absolutely.
too in that role.
Yeah. And that's all information found on our website. Right now we are doing some virtual trainings and then hands-on training as well.
Yeah, as I had mentioned, I have a neighbor and a very good friend who's part of the volunteer group, and she has actually shared with me that she'll note progress and the joy that the participants feel when they're on the horses as well. How are you funded, Kitty? How does
we are a
funded?
private nonprofit, so we do have we charge a nominal about almost 33% is the tuition of the actual cost of services.
Yeah.
So we are constantly fundraising to make up that gap, that 67% subsidy. That comes from a number of different sources. We have, like many nonprofits, your annual appeal. We used to be a membership organization. We no longer have that caveat, but we do go out for individuals and solicit. We look for foundations, corporate support. Many wonderful businesses in our community provide us corporate support. In exchange, they get their name out on our website, but they do it because they're supporting this community. And we also have events. We have 2 big events. The next most current event is our virtual holiday market. That'll be taking place for 2 weeks in November. We have about 50 vendors. Previous to the pandemic, it was an in-person event which brought people to the facility, and it was a very festive pre-holiday time right before Thanksgiving where people could shop and interact, and we had great local products, produce as well as general products. We're trying to keep the same festive shopping glory happening through the virtual market, so please visit our website.
I'm looking forward to that too, because as I said, Deb and I have talked about it in the past, and I know that has been a wonderful showcase for some local
and it gives people
well.
a chance to see the facility. We also, in that one, we partner with the Shoreline Soup Kitchens and Pantries. So we are still doing that this year. We're asking people to drop off canned goods because that's going to be an area that's hard hit this year. So that they can be dropping those off at High Hopes, and we're going to collect those too.
Oh, that's wonderful.
We also do a raffle, and that's the fundraiser aspect, right? We have a great raffle. It's Reynolds Subaru has partnered with us to give us a good discount on a Forester, 2020 Forester. We have an Apple iPad and a few other neat products. So come on, go to the website.
I did see the website because I was checking out that car.
We're going to need a little help selling those raffle tickets this year because we would normally sell a lot with all the people. We would normally have 2,000 or 3,000 people at High Hopes during the day.
Oh, you would.
But so we need a little help selling those raffle tickets.
Oh yeah, no, I did notice that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to say that I really admired about the website too is you alluded to it earlier about the partnerships you have with corporations. There's such a nice shout out on your website talking about them and a very personal type account on all the benefits from the sponsors and their partnership with you. So you seem to have the community connections throughout the different programming aspects.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I am always amazed actually at our corporate sponsors and our local businesses that struggle as businesses to stay alive, yet recognize the value. And I think part of that is because not only is High Hopes a place for people with disabilities, but it is a place of unconditional acceptance for everyone, staff, volunteers, the community, and our participants. And our volunteer community is such a big piece of who we are and our identity. And those are folks who live in a geographical area visiting these businesses. So we could not do what we do without that corporate sponsorship support from those area businesses.
And you have some big ones too, which is wonderful.
Well, we are very, very grateful.
Are you always looking for volunteers, or?
We are always looking for
always
volunteers.
looking for volunteers?
Yes, yes. Even right now with the pandemic, we're only operating at about 70%.
Yeah.
But not all of our volunteers feel comfortable in going out these days. So we are recruiting, constantly retraining, and people's lives change. They become grandparents. They move away. Their life changes. The good things, and or illness or other things. So there is a constant change. But and we really value our volunteers. Again, we could not do what we do without their help day in and day out, feeding horses, cleaning paddocks, getting horses ready for classes, leading horses, working with our riders, helping with fundraisers, being on our board, being on our committees. So it's a heavy volunteer-run organization.
How many participants would you say you have right now?
Right now, on a weekly basis, we're up to about 120 or so. Prior to pandemic, we were over 200 at various times in our history. So there is a big change. For some of our more vulnerable population, they aren't still riding. Folks who it's just not safe for them at this point. But there are others that are interested. Where we see a big increase right now is in some of the youth who are dealing with anxiety. And kids who just aren't, are being homeschooled, just are feeling the lack of that social, but really anxiety and depression are big areas.
And parents can contact you if they're interested in supporting their
they can
children
learn
that
more about
way.
us through the website. There's an application form. They can call. They can come for a visit. They can bring their children to see us if they want to.
Well, Kitty, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for helping to share the word. We are this community, and we want to do what we need to do for folks. One of the others is first responders and their families. So if the horse can do a lot to help just mitigate some of those anxieties. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm so glad we had a chance to talk about it.
Great.
I want to thank you for being here, and I want to encourage everyone watching to please go to the website for High Hopes. Check it out. They just had some awards that were presented up there. Go to look at some of the fundraising activities, and certainly take some time to drop by one of the gems of the shoreline, High Hopes. Thank you again. Till next time, take care.